They didn't warn her. They didn't debate it. One line of code slipped across the secure feed like a razor through skin. Spectre 7 is now an unacceptable liability. Termination authorized. That was how Aria Monroe learned she had just been sentenced to die. The Ravenwood ops room glowed in pale light. Screens whispering with satellite grids and encrypted chatter most people would call conspiracy. Aria sat motionless, her eyes scanning as if nothing had changed, though the world had just tilted. Her coffee was cold, forgotten. The HK-416 beside her radiated its own quiet promise, 14.5-inch barrel, suppressor mounted, 30 rounds of M855A1 seated with the certainty of routine. Chamber. Settle. Breathe. It wasn't comfort, it was survival. At 29, she was already a ghost story. Spectre 7. 7 years in programs without names, 43 confirmed kills, 0 failed missions. Before that, airborne infantry, a degree buried in classified files, languages learned not for travel, but for disappearing. To most of Ravenwood, she was just another operator in the shadows. To Colonel Marcus Rourke, she was the one variable he could trust when the math demanded certainty. Rourke's fingers tapped the keyboard, and the main display bloomed with a file the NSA had abandoned as unbreakable. The Triad. 3 names scrolled across the screen: Victor Morozov, Samir Haddad, Sofia Duarte, architects of coups, bombings, regimes toppled in silence. Their network was supposed to be untouchable. But Aria had touched it. She hadn't brute-forced her way in. She had listened, patient as erosion. 8 months of tracing anomalies, tiny transfers, time windows too precise, substitution codes disguised as corporate noise. Where others saw static, she heard rhythm. 3 months to break the cadence, 3 more to map the choreography. To her, randomness was never random. It was a song waiting for the right ear. Aria, Rourke's voice was gravel. Look at this. She leaned forward. The decrypted header confirmed what the first line had promised: recommend immediate termination. Simultaneous strikes, no survivors, 72 hours. The words were sterile. The meaning was not. Family first, father, sister, niece. Break the operator by naming what she loves. Aria's face never shifted. Inside. The arithmetic clicked into place. Fear was wasted energy. Surprise was useless. Weapons weren't only forged of steel. Sometimes they were made of resolve, sharpened to a point. Outside. The Nevada desert wind carried silence across endless sand. Inside. Ravenwood's fluorescent lights felt like interrogation lamps, too bright for the war she was about to choose. She drew one breath, slow and final, and opened her eyes with the precision of someone who knew hesitation was a luxury. If the Triad wanted Spectre 7, they would have to come and earn it. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss the next episodes. They told her family was already on their way to safety. Father, sister, niece spirited to a secure location before the storm broke. Aria listened without nodding. Protection was protocol. Hiding was permission. But neither changed the math. How long have we hunted them? She asked at last. Colonel Marcus Rourke's eyes narrowed at the main display, at the lines of code and transactions already burned into memory. 9 years, he said. His tone carried the fatigue of a man who had drawn this map too many times. Aria's fingers moved across the board, and patterns that looked like chaos to others began folding into rhythm. 9 years, she repeated softly. And tonight they gave us the route in... The Triad had slipped, not in words, but in silence, buried inside their encrypted order of assassination. Aria had recognized a habit she'd charted for months, 48 hours of total digital blackout before a major operation. No chatter, no finance proxies, no shells moving money. They thought silence was protection. To Aria, silence was a spotlight. She marked the anomaly in red, each gap lined up with confirmed past strikes and embassy bombing in Ankara, an arms convoy shredded outside Benghazi, a political killing in Marseille. Every operation had been preceded by the same 2-day void, which meant another blackout was coming, which meant they had to meet. "You want to hit them here on U.S. soil?" Rourke asked, voice edged with the weight of law and consequence. "You know what happens if this leaks oversight? Hearings, headlines. We can't authorize Aria cut him off. They're planning coordinated murder here. That gives us defensive authority. The only thing oversight does is measure body bags." Her tone wasn't heated. It was the clipped cadence of an operator mapping a vector. For 72 minutes, she had been designing the response. No hesitation. No outside input. Operation Nightfall wasn't defense anymore. It was a lure. She would make the Triad believe they'd found her weakness. She turned the Red Mesa safe house into geometry, angles of fire stripped to their cleanest lines. Furniture cleared until rooms became funnels, concrete pillars measured for cover, windows gauged for silhouette. Every corridor became a decision tree where she dictated the answers. Weapons were staged like instruments in a symphony she alone could conduct. Benelli M4 in the hallway, SIG P320 by the kitchen counter, HK-416s never far from reach. Magazines stacked and restacked until she could reload blind. She placed one claymore on the outer perimeter, angled to catch a staggered approach, and tucked 2 M84 stun grenades along her fallback route. To anyone else, it looked paranoid. To her, it was choreography. Major Devon Hale stopped by the threshold, arms folded. "One operator against the Triad and their strike teams, Aria. Even for you, they'll abort if they smell backup." She answered. "This has to look like a lone mistake." "That's the point." Hale studied her face, found no hesitation there, and left without another word. When the transmission went out, deliberately flawed. Crafted to look like a careless breach, it carried just enough procedural code to be believable, a slip of operational security, the kind of amateur mistake no professional should ever make. Exactly the sort of mistake predators would leap toward. Aria sent it at 1400 hours, hands steady, heartbeat slow, the rhythm of someone who had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. It wasn't a broadcast, it was an invitation. 47 minutes later, the Triad's network pulsed alive. Tiny ripples at first, then a surge of coordinated chatter where silence had lived. She leaned back in her chair, the hum of monitors filling the Ravenwood ops room, and allowed herself the faintest smile. They were coming, exactly where she wanted them. They had taken the bait. For 18 hours, Aria watched the board light up convoys shifting through back roads, encrypted signals masked as silence, financial proxies suddenly going dark. Patterns most analysts missed pulsed like neon against her wall of glass. The Triad thought they were predators circling. They didn't realize they'd already stepped into the kill box of someone who'd been mapping them for years. Morozov commanded the strike with his usual clinical arrogance. Haddad, the tactician, calculated approach vectors, angles of fire, fields of vision. Duarte the executioner wasn't content with distance. She wanted the kill personal, wanted Aria to feel her family's fear. Together they were efficient, disciplined, lethal. But efficiency could be predicted, and prediction could be turned into certainty. For hours, Aria sat in stillness, her pulse slow, her body rehearsing every breach she'd drawn on glass. Every wall was a map, every corner an equation, every second rehearsed until her muscles knew what her conscious mind no longer had to command. When Duarte's voice came over the comm smooth. Accented, predatory, it felt like a script Aria had already written. Hello, Spectre 7, or should I say, Aria. The taunt lingered, thick with promise. Duarte painted threats against Aria's family in cold detail, savoring the cruelty, granting her 3 hours to drown in inevitability. Aria only smiled, unseen in the dark. You're right, she said evenly. Someone's dying slow tonight. We'll see who walks away. At dawn. The safe house shuddered. External power severed. Comms jammed. They thought they'd blinded her. But Aria had her own light, her own silent lines. Through her night scope, she watched 12 operators ghost across the compound, silent. Professional. Hands cutting signals through the dark. She respected them. That respect made what came next almost merciful. The shaped charge tore the door, the flashbang painted white. 4 operators stormed the entry. Aria let them take 3 steps. The HK-416 whispered controlled bursts, steady rhythm. 3 bodies folded instantly. The 4th fired blind, muzzle screaming arcs into concrete. She was already behind cover. 1 heartbeat later, he was down. 4 kills in 5 seconds. The second team hesitated at the sound of suppressed fire. Fatal mistake. They stacked in the doorway, the fatal funnel. Aria poured disciplined fire into the choke point. 2 collapsed before they knew they'd been hit. The leader tried to form an order in Arabic before her rounds punctuated his chest. She flowed from cover, double-tapped, rolled, rose 2 more down. They weren't fighting her plan. They were feeding it. The third team swung wide to flank. She had been waiting. A flashbang from her belt erupted, blinding, disorienting. She moved through the smoke like water through cracks, rifle to shoulder, sights snapping to skulls. 1 round ricocheted near her face. She dropped prone, rolled, came up firing. Another body dropped, choking on blood. 90 seconds. 11 of 12 were down. The last survivor broke goggles skewed. Magazine empty. Panic clawing his throat. Aria let him run. Fear was ammunition, too. He burst outside screaming. It's a trap only to collapse at Duarte's boots. 3 neat holes in his spine. And then, for the first time, the triad themselves were exposed, Morozov. Haddad, Duarte 15 meters away, no longer encrypted ghosts, but flesh. Caught in disbelief as Aria stepped into the doorway, rifle leveled, calm as dawn. The foot soldiers were gone. Now the war was personal. The compound fell silent after the strike team's collapse. Smoke curled through shattered windows, plaster dust hanging like desert fog. But Aria knew the triad weren't ghosts to vanish quietly. They were still here. Viktor Morozov moved first. The Russian stepped out from a side office, shoulders squared, eyes cold as Siberian ice. A compact CZ-75 pistol gleamed in his grip. His first shots barked fast, 2 slugs tearing into the pillar inches from Aria's head. Concrete spat chips across her cheek. She ducked, swung left, returned fire. Morozov pivoted low, tactical even in desperation. But Aria's rhythm never faltered. Breathe, align, squeeze. The third round cored through his chest, ending the myth of his invincibility. Samir Haddad answered with fury from the far corridor. His USP tactical thundered. Suppressive fire hammered the walls, sparks flying from rebar. He wasn't retreating. He was hunting. Aria slid across the floor, the Benelli M4 already hot in her hands. The buckshot roared, punching through plaster and air alike. Haddad staggered, dropped to a knee, and sent one last desperate burst. The rounds stitched the wall inches from her arm. Her second shot folded him back against the hallway door. eyes wide in disbelief that calculation could lose to instinct. Then came Sofia Duarte. Unlike the others, she didn't charge, she shifted like a phantom, moving from shadow to shadow. Her P90 chattered in short bursts, forcing Aria to dive behind a concrete brace. Sparks rained down as the rounds chewed steel. Aria rolled, slid to a fresh angle, Duarte anticipated, lobbing fire from her new position. For 30 seconds it was chess, with bullets the scrape of boots, the echo of suppressed fire, the sharp tang of cordite. Aria stilled herself, slowed her breath, and waited for Duarte's rhythm. Every fighter has one, the half-second between firing and moving, the pause where calculation steals focus, the instant Duarte leaned from cover. Aria's HK-416 cracked once. The impact drove Duarte back into the wall, her weapon slipping from numb fingers. Silence reclaimed the safe house. 3 leaders: Morozov, Haddad. Duarte lay broken, the triad undone in less than 4 minutes. But it hadn't been easy. They had fought like the predators they were, forcing Aria to prove that survival wasn't luck, it was precision. When the response team finally breached the compound, they found her standing alone in the wreckage, rifle low, breath calm, the mission complete. To them it looked clinical. To her, it felt like subtraction, 3 names erased from the ledger, but at a cost only she carried. For years she measured herself in seconds, in shots, in missions that ended before most even began. But after Syria, after pulling children from a compound that never knew how close it had come to ruin, Aria Monroe finally slowed down. At Fort Belvoir, reassignment orders waited. She stepped into the training facility, recruits already lined up, whispering. To them, she was a classified rumor. Spectre 743 confirmed kills. 0 failures. They expected a legend. What they found was a woman who carried silence heavier than any metal. She drilled them in fundamentals angles, terrain, how to keep moving when exhaustion blurred thought. But between lessons, she gave them something no manual could: the truth that being lethal was easy. Choosing restraint was harder. Protecting life matters more than counting kills. She told them, a weapon doesn't decide. A protector does. Some nodded. Others stared shaken that the most dangerous operator they would ever meet cared most about keeping them human. For the first time, Aria wasn't just shaping missions, she was shaping people. And in that, she discovered a victory no after-action report could capture: the proof that humanity could be guarded as fiercely as any objective. Because in the end, she had learned what few ever do. A warrior isn't just someone who fights. A warrior is someone who fights for others and never forgets why.